In this episode, we're going to be talking about our deep issues and struggles with burnout, how we recognized that we were in burnout, and then some of the strategies that we used to get out of that season.
So there was an article earlier this year that has stayed with me, and I think it's worth mentioning. They researched into what are considered the top 10 most stressful jobs in the US. Do you know what they are?
Hit me.
Number 1 is doctors. That makes perfect sense. Number 3 was doctor's assistants. Now, can you guess why I skipped 2? Number 2 was editors.
That's actually really crazy.
Number 2,
crazy.
Next to doctors, and we can only imagine doctors being an incredible. You're handling someone's life. We're handling a project that doesn't really matter in the end of it, but good God, is it intense pressure, and it's breaking us, and it's incredibly stressful. For it to be reported as one of the second most stressful jobs in America, we chose the wrong career, Jordan. Why did we do this to ourselves?
No, I think it's true. I think lots of us, including myself, we put so much of our worth and who we are as an identity, as a person, into how good our work is. We
put our output as our identity, and that's scary. It's like we value ourselves, we value our personal identities on what we're doing, and so we put everything that we can and everything that we edit into being the best thing possible. We say a lot that as an editor, you're making 24 decisions a second, but there's also hundreds of other little micro choices you've had to make in that 1 second, and fucking hell, it is incredibly stressful. It is a lot of demand, and my God, we love it, but it also sucks.
Hayden, how are you feeling?
I could be better. I've been wanting to have this conversation with you about some of the recent emotional and mental and physical experiences I've been having the past few years. I honestly don't think enough people actually talk about the in-depth experiences of it all. We can all say, hey guys, I'm burnt out. And I think we get that a lot. But I don't actually think enough people have really tried to understand it properly or understand themselves properly in the experiences that they have in burnout. And then also, not to mention, when they are burning out or burnt out, what are they actually doing about it?
Right.
Despite the fact that us being an editing podcast, we try to talk about editing and storytelling, and I would say the culture of editing in this really confident way. But I also think we also need to acknowledge the times where we don't quite know the answers. And part of this podcast is us finding out what those can be, and also finding out what can be best for us and what can be best for the community. So this conversation, we're kind of going into this not knowing the answers, but it's actually something that I just want to talk about.
Burnout in general in the film industry feels like it's commonplace. It's just something that we all have to deal with. It's a rite of passage.
It's normalized.
Yeah, it's very normalized. And so why is that? What can we do about it? And how can we be vulnerable with our own stories and our own experiences to, try to rewrite the narrative?
With a decent chunk of our audience being in the creator economy, it's like we're not the only ones. This is a systemic issue. I've seen this platform grow, and I've seen creators come and go in terms of the trends, but vast majority of them actually just end because of burnout. 61% of YouTube creators experience burnout. And the top reasons are being the pressure to post content, content fatigue, and the emotional labor of trying to be authentic.
So people are trying so hard to be authentic that it causes them physical and mental fatigue. Therefore, they are not being authentic.
It's a paradox. And I think it is because of, again, the societal pressure, the cultural pressure, but I also think part of it is also the algorithmic pressure. The way I see it is that the algorithm doesn't reward good quality content, it actually only rewards more content. And so it puts the pressure on you to be making as much as you can at a very, very consistent level. So much so that there are people that stream 24 hours a day. They stream their entire lives. There's people who are making TikTok videos, they're making 4 to 5 a day. Us on YouTube, we want to be posting weekly or 3 times a week. We're always under that impression of just more, go bigger, do it again. Oh, you got a 10 out of 10? Fuck you. And it's just like, oh, you got a 1 out of 10? Let me throw you some confetti. Feel that dopamine. It's like the pressure of the algorithm is just on you, trying to drown you in a sense.
So what is burnout?
Mm-hmm.
Let's just define it. This is what the World Health Organization says. They say burnout is a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. It is characterized by 3 dimensions. Number 1, feelings of energy, depletion, or exhaustion. Number 2, increased mental distance from one's job, or feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job, and reduced professional efficacy. Those are some big words. Great way to go, health organization.
Trying to be all smart.
Making me feel stupid. But essentially, it's you have a job and it's sucking all the life out of you.
You don't want to do the job.
Yeah.
But then I would say you're probably obligated to. You're forced to. Even with both of us. How often do we know we have to do X edit that day, and we get started, and then you blink and you're on Instagram? But it's a symptom, though. And then how often is it that when you're doing a project that you're genuinely excited about, and then you forget that the world exists outside of that?
Yeah.
Now, how often is it something you're excited about, and then how often is it a project that you end up spending half your day on social media?
I think there's some projects that you're passionate about, and you're like, I'm gonna give my life to this project.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is initially really a healthy thing because you're so excited about it, you're passionate about it. But when it becomes literally your life, there's more to life than working on one project. And so that's a great thing. It could have a negative side effect. But also there's projects that you just have to do because you have to make some money, you have to survive in some way. And so those are the projects that I find myself scrolling, looking for any other source of dopamine or serotonin that I can get
because the project's not giving it to you.
It's not giving it to me. Exactly.
Yes. And so you start looking for somewhere else. Now, I think that generates a new paradox. When something that could have potentially been done in 2 hours, maybe 3 hours, but you end up spending all day on it, and then because you've just been binging on dopamine, you now feel like crap at the end of that day. Not because you've been not doing that project fast enough, it's because you have been binging. Where I'm going with this is that I've been thinking a lot about the projects that I genuinely don't want to do. Like the edits that I just I can't be fucking bothered, and I end up wasting a lot of my time. There kind of then begins this sort of death of 1,000 cuts negative loop where because I've ended up wasting my time, because I'm also burned out, I am then enabling that burnout behavior even more by essentially making it worse, by cutting more into the burnout behaviors. That's, I think, one end of the spectrum. There is the other end of the spectrum where it is you have the deadlines. You have someone comes to you and says, hey, I want this project that will take a month to edit, but I need you to get it done in 10 days. And then those are also the other really, really intense ones. And so you are forced into doing 12-hour days. You wake up, you sit down at the desk, you're forced to do everything that you can, and then it gets 11 p.m. and then you crash. And then you wake up at 6 a.m. and you didn't sleep that well because you're still thinking about the project and you're going to do it again and again and again. That is also the other end of the spectrum. And so have you also had those sort of experiences?
So for me, the one time that I burnt out pretty bad was right after film school, actually. So going through film school, I was so focused and determined to make it as a video editor. That was my sole goal. That was my sole purpose. That's why I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars at this university. And so there's a big fire under my butt to make it. And I literally came to Los Angeles from Wisconsin. My family's still in Wisconsin. And so I had to figure out how to make a certain amount of money so I could survive in LA and not have to move back ashamedly with my tail between my legs back to Wisconsin. Was freelance editing while I was still in university. I had a mentor who told me, hey bro, I think you could make it as a freelance editor. And so I was like, okay, I can try to do that. And then we literally together sat down, made a budget, figured out that I needed $2,000 a month to be able to live in LA and cover all my expenses. And I was living as cheap as I possibly could live, just, as a single college student guy, rooming with a bunch of other guys. And so I was like, okay, all I got to do is make $2,000 a month. And so I went crazy. I just went bonkers, calling people up, meeting them for coffee, networking like nuts, taking any editing job I could get. And I was working right out of college, I graduated, and I just like did not stop working because I was working in college, and then right when I graduated, it just like I didn't even feel like I graduated. It just like skipped by me. I was like, okay, I gotta go to the ceremony, keep going, and I was freelance editing, doing a few different projects. I was doing commercials. I had just started doing music videos at that point. They were paying horribly, not paying well. I mean, I was a new editor too, so it's fair.
No, it's not fair, but keep going.
I was working probably like 60 to 80 hours a week. Just like so many hours. I remember staying up till 5 a.m. fairly consistently trying to hit music video deadlines. I didn't even realize I was really burnt out until this happened. So I had just done a few music videos. I met this big director named Arad. I talked about meeting him on other episodes. He had me do a documentary, gave me a few hard drives. I was driving to LA also fairly often, and I live kind of far from LA. And there was a lot of footage, so there's multiple hard drives. And one of them was blank, so I just needed to reformat it. And so I go home, open up my computer, start working on it. I reformat a drive. I'm just still working. And then I realize that the drive that I reformatted had all of the footage.
No.
For the entire documentary. This was like my first big project. This was like the biggest project that I've ever done in my career at this point. It was like a big music documentary for Tyga. So he's like big time rapper at the time, and literally lost my mind. I was so terrified because I had been working for like 5 years, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to make it as an editor. In Hollywood, and I literally just like I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm fired. I'm done. This is like the biggest, best director I've ever worked with. So I just remember like shutting down my computer, walking outside. We had a park nearby, and I just was like crying, just walking around in the park like in the middle of the night.
Oh my god.
Because I was like, I'm done. Like I literally remember repeating like I'm doomed in my head. Like I was like, I'm done. Like I've literally burnt every bridge. I just ruined this entire documentary. They had actually like no backups. They had no backups of the raw footage. They only had proxies. I edited the whole thing on proxies, and then they eventually shelved the entire documentary, so it never came out.
No.
So it was all for nothing, and it was all fine in the end. But in that moment, I was like, I am so tired that I just made horrible decisions. My relationship, I was living with some roommates, some of my best friends from college. They were like, Jordan, are you even okay? Like, we don't see you for like long periods of time, and you are distant. You're very irritable. My family was in Wisconsin. They hadn't heard from me for like a few months. And so all of the relationships, the things that are important in life were like falling to the wayside. I realized like, oh shoot, like I have royally messed this up. The values that I thought, like the goals that I was going for to make it as an editor in Hollywood, were very, very fear-based and very survival-based because I had set those goals. Like I need to make $2,000 a month. I was barely making it, barely scraping by doing some random editing jobs here and there. And even though I was editing for big clients, they were not paying well. And I think a huge part of that was because I didn't understand my worth and who I was as an editor. And I would just say yes to anything. I was a yes man. I'd be like, you need me to show up at this music video set at 12 p.m. to pick up a hard drive? Sure, I'm there. I'll do it. Or I remember driving to a director's house at like, I think 8 a.m. like in LA traffic. It took me like 2 hours to get there just to pick up a hard drive and then go back, because he didn't want to Uber it because it was like too much sensitive information, or he didn't want to send it like with somebody else. And so I was busting my butt, like trying to make it.
There's just so much to unpack there.
I know.
I mean, one, unfortunately, you fell victim to people with money that say they don't have money doing predatory behaviors because they don't want to spend the money.
Yes.
And then so therefore, like, by not paying you enough, they are actually essentially buying your mental health.
Yeah.
I think so. Like that's what happened there, and then I think especially with us trying to make it through, it's like we are trying to take any and every opportunity that we can, without potentially maybe even considering if this opportunity is actually worth it.
Yeah. For me, I was like, every opportunity is worth it. I need to survive. I am not going home to Wisconsin. It's not happening for me. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And I did that, and I realized how detrimental it was.
If you don't mind me asking, if you're only having to raise $2,000 a month to live in LA, what was the quality of life like in where you were living?
I mean, my quality of life as far as like financially, it was like, imagine just like eating ramen, being in college. It was like that kind of quality of life. And it was fun. I was in my early 20s just hanging out with my friends, except I wasn't. I was at a warehouse editing all night. But, you have a lot more resilience when you're younger like that.
Yeah, you have a lot more resilience when you're young. Absolutely right. But it's like, but I was also thinking in terms of that, it was like the environment you were in was also not great in terms of, like four roommates. You probably didn't get that much privacy in that sort of sense. You probably weren't able to get that good quality sleep. And so your quality of sleep is diminishing. That ripples into the next day. If you're only eating ramen, that's just pure sodium and carbs.
That's true. That's interesting that you say my quality of life wasn't that great, which looking back at it now, I mean, it kind of, it's not that great, but I was used to living like in dorms and like trash apartments in college, and we had a house at that point. So I was like, we are living large, guys. I got my friends. We're in a house. We have a kitchen to ourselves. This is awesome. I was feeling great about my living situation at the time.
This might just me being a posh.
No,
I don't think I should say that word. There was a few other things that I picked up though in when you were telling me your story. I think one was the anxiety of, if I screw this up, my entire career is over.
Yeah.
You did screw this up.
Yep.
And then you were convinced this was it. I am done. But you're here.
I'm here.
You're at this moment.
By the grace of God.
How did you restart? How did you manage to make sure that you still continued living here in LA and having a career here?
Well, to finish the story with the formatted hard drive that I thought was blank, but it really was actually all the footage. I eventually, I think the next day I literally drove to LA to like a hard drive recovery place. I like did the whole thing, paid a bunch of money, tried to get it recovered. They couldn't get it recovered. And the director was so kind. He was like, "You're an idiot. Fix it." He was way nicer than that, but that's essentially kind of what he was saying. I fully expected him to be like, "Okay, you're done. You're like this stupid kid out of college. You have no idea what you're doing. Let's go hire somebody else." But he stuck with me, and he was so kind. And he said, we're going to get through this together. It's going to be just fine. And I really thought I was done, but there's so much grace if you just say, "Hey, this was my mistake. I'm responsible for it." And then you do your best to fix it. Like, mistakes happen and you should learn from your mistake and try to not repeat it. Many people aren't as mean as you might think that they are.
But that's good. So I think you're very fortunate that you happen to be working with very forgiving people. The Editing Podcast is brought to you by Riverside.
Honestly, if you're not using Riverside for all of your virtual meetings, you're making a big mistake.
I've even been using it for consultations. As soon as we're done, I get to send them the entire recording.
And not to mention, the recording quality is it's good.
Whereas other virtual meeting services can only do up to 720, Riverside can do 4K.
Which is why we like to use it for podcasting. And we love it because it records each audio and video track separately, so that editing is such a breeze when we get into post.
Which means our editor can get started on cutting it almost immediately.
And even if you or your guest has absolute garbage internet, it doesn't matter. Because remember that one time when we were in the hotel room?
The call kept on jostling. I thought we lost it, but because Riverside records locally and then uploads, the call was perfect. And it's easy for the guests. They don't need to install anything. You just send them the link and you can start recording.
It even says like, roll out the red carpet. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it makes me feel special.
It makes me feel so special.
If you're podcasting, creating video content, or recording online calls, then sign up to riverside.fm for free and use code EditingPodcast for 20% off.
And you can find that link in the description, and we'll see you back in the interview. Yes.
Yeah.
But then moving forward from there, I realized that I was not doing well. And so I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up believing in God. And so I was like, you know what? We got to start there. We got to start somewhere. And honestly, the thing that really, really helped me was opening up my Bible and this document that has been around for thousands of years that tells you how to best live your life. So I was like, maybe there'll be some wisdom in here. And I read a verse. It's Matthew 11:28-30. It says, "Come to me." This is Jesus speaking, by the way. And it says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And a yoke, if you guys don't know, is a wooden bar that connects two oxen so they can pull heavy loads together. So Jesus is saying, there's so many things that the world puts on you and that you put on yourself that you actually don't have to. Even if you don't believe in God, reprioritizing your life and looking at things as, the way that they should be. I was driven by fear. I was like, if I don't do this, I'm not going to make it, and I'm going to leave, and I'm going to be ashamed, and I'm going to, lose everything that I've worked for. Instead, I should have been driven by faith in valuing what I can contribute. So at that point, I was just like, all right, people are the most important thing. So let's put let's put God, our family, and friends first. That's what matters. And so I just started working and watering those relationships, making time for that. And I think that's what really started to bring me out of that season. I was able to start networking a little bit more. I had time to get coffee with more people, talk about my passion for editing. And that actually led to so many more high-paying jobs. And my career just started taking off in a great direction after I stopped taking all these horrible paying jobs and working 80 hours a week. Crazy, right?
It's you've identified another. I love finding paradoxes. By working so hard, you actually cut off yourself from finding better opportunities.
Yes,
because you're trying to do so many hours.
Yes.
Now, I think it's also definitely worth mentioning. I think I'm not a man of faith, but I also still highly respect and can care for people who are in faith. And I think one of the things I do appreciate in the Bible with some of its best teachings is just the reminder to be loved and to love. And that's why I value that a lot, because again, it's a similar thing for me where it's like, and we'll get into some of my worst burnout experiences as well. But the bottom line was I then also had that sort of moment of discovery of like, okay, what is the actual reasons that why we're existing? And then I learned to reconnect with people. And then I was able to enjoy my life a little bit more. And if I'm also honest, it actually gave me better creative opportunities because it wasn't the only thing I was thinking about.
Yes.
One of the things that was always the biggest alarm red flag for me was in your story, you were driving and falling asleep at the wheel. Again, it's a similar thing, like that's normalized behavior. No, you could kill someone doing that.
Yeah, that's really bad.
For you though, what are your other burnout behaviors?
Honestly, just keeping track of the time working is just very interesting. Like I didn't realize at the time I was working 60 to 80 hours a week. I was like, I'm just going to work. I'm editing. It's fun. We're having a great time. But if you actually keep track, especially as a freelancer, how much time you're actually spending working, doing emails, all of those things. And if it's getting to above, 8 to 10 hours a day, I think it's a little bit too much. We should try to look for ways to cut back. I was very irritable. It was hard to have a conversation with me. I was wanting, like, lots of times my friends would be like, hey, bro, we're going to go, like, grab some food, hang out, and just hang. And I'd be like, sorry, guys, I can't. I'm editing. Or, like, things like that where you start seeing yourself make sacrifices in your life for your job.
Yeah.
That's when it's like, maybe you shouldn't be doing that. Maybe there's some things that are more important in your life than your job. When I get tired, I remember, I think this was even, like, last year. This is weird. And kind of vulnerable. When I get tired, I turn to pornography a lot. I just start it takes over my life. It becomes an addiction. And I try to really, really hard not to have that be a normal thing in my life. But when I get tired, when I get burnt out, I remember I was like doing an editing job and then also doing like a church event at the same time for an entire week. And that Friday night, I was just like done. And I hadn't done it in a long time. And then I was just like, yep, let's go. And then we're looking at porn then. And so that is like my vice for like, if that ever happens, that's like a big flashing warning sign that Jordan, you are way too tired. You need to figure it out.
Drag you out of that. Right again. Well, yeah, I think for majority of society, I think that being a vice, because I think it is part of that. And I think it's just the fantasy element kind of, it is, some pornography is in such a different world that you kind of can forget about your world for that brief moment. And then, of course, the whole experience puts you into that sort of physical focus as well. And so for that brief moment, everything's okay. And I think that's why pornography does become such an addictive experiences for a lot of people. And again, it's like, even for me growing up, like that was also an experience for me. The whole cultural norms of pornography is a whole different conversation. For you to be able to share that, I think it was actually incredibly important. And I think it is something that I think a lot of, I would say, men should be able to openly more talk about, especially with those behaviors. And I think just the nature of it, it's like we're trained to keep it secret.
Yeah.
And I actually think it is an industry that should be explored and challenged a lot more in terms of what is it doing towards our mental health, because that is a death by 1,000 cuts thing again. It doesn't help. It's like a brief, like, okay fix, but it in the end long term makes it worse. Because we also know how the consumption of pornography does change your mentality and towards attitude and towards how we look at women. It does affect that long term. But it also reminds me of like my vice, and you're probably getting the mental health long term effects. My vice was giving me significant physical changes in my body, in the fact that my vice was fast food. I'm working 8 to 10 hours a day on some of these videos. I go to bed at midnight and wake up at 6 a.m. and get back into it. And it's the only thing that I can think about. And everything else, it doesn't matter, because this thing has to get done. I might be enjoying the process of making it, but I actually make the choice to sacrifice my own body and my mind for the project. And that's why for me, all right, let me get started. Let me order Starbucks. So let me order like a big fat latte, massive, like tons of caffeine. I get extra shots in it. I would get 2 sandwiches, and I'll also get like a cake pop as well. So that's already like 1,000 calories in the morning, and it's big, greasy stuff. Lunchtime comes around. I've been editing for ages. Oh, and realize I'm hungry. Okay, I'll get up my phone and I'm editing, and I like know where the things are on the menu. And I was like, okay, let me Taco Bell. Let me get a burrito. Let me get a beefy 5-layer burrito. Let me get 2 chicken chipotle melts. Let me get 2 quesadillas. Fuck yeah. And then it just arrives at my front door. Pick it up. I'm still thinking about the editing. Pick it up, and I just start stuffing my face while I'm focused on the project. And then evening comes along, and it's like, this is when it's getting like 11:30 or so, and so oh crap, I realize I'm hungry again. I've already got, like, my desk is littered with trash. Let's add towards it. I will order McDonald's. Now this is the worst part. Do you want me to tell you? And I have this order saved in my phone. Here's what I do with my normal McDonald's meal. First of all, I get a large Big Mac meal. That's already about 2,000 calories. Then I get a double cheeseburger. That's probably about another 500 to 600 calories. Then I get 20 chicken nuggets. And then I will then get a McChicken as well. And if I'm really feeling it, I'll get a filet fish as well.
You're getting after it, man.
Yeah. So I order half of the McDonald's menu, as far as I know. It arrives in 10, 20 minutes, and then off I go, doing the last couple of hours of work, just stuffing my face again. And this is the weird thing. It's like, I'm not tasting it. I'm not enjoying it. But I'm just stuffing my face while I'm still thinking about the edit. And I've sometimes caught myself like this tastes great, but I don't give a shit because I'm still thinking about the edit. On those burnout days, I would end up eating about 6,000 calories a day.
Wow.
And as adults, before their 30s, you're only really meant to have just over 2,000 a day. So I'm having 3 to 4 days worth of food in a day on the days when I am like broken and burnt out, and the only thing that matters is this project.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of this burnout things happen. It is, we can get really passionate about something and we can get really, really into it, and we love that we're doing, but we choose to sacrifice ourselves for the project. And then that then ripples into our mental health and our physical health. And then actually that then ripples into our creativity and our ability of creativity. And then suddenly there comes a point where it's just like the deadline's coming up and it's just like you can't even focus anymore. And so it's like that's where I'm beginning to discover like those issues. But I haven't fixed it. I will still do that. It's like for me, when I'm having the burnout experiences, that is my vice that helps me just get through that day just a little bit more.
That's so interesting. I feel that. I think I do, honestly, the opposite. I mean, I do the same thing, but in the opposite way. That's also not great at all. Where if I'm editing, I'm in the zone, I'm passionate about this project, I'll just skip meals. Like, I just won't eat. you tell yourself when you're in that moment, this is the only thing that matters. Everything else doesn't matter. We can get rid of it. I can do whatever I want. I don't have time to take a break and eat a good meal, so I'm just going to keep going. I'm not going to eat, or I'm going to order Postmates or whatever it might be. I think there's all these lies that you tell yourself while you're in the midst of becoming obsessed with a project.
Yeah.
It's so hard to control. It really is, because like I objectively know these things in my head, but I just like you, I will still struggle with it so much.
These projects require so much mental energy that I actually think it's a subconscious response in a way. We simply don't have the mental capacity to think about what is it that I need to eat? Do I need to work out? I simply don't have that mental capacity because it's so preoccupied in the project. And so I think a lot of it is the subconscious responses.
Yeah.
In the best way of putting it, meals have turned up in front of my door and I didn't even realize I ordered it. What I'm trying to get at and what I'm trying to realize here is just that discipline to then actually kind of pull yourself out of that flow state.
Yeah.
Which is weird to say because like you've always got to get in that flow state. It's always it's a hustle culture, hustle porn culture
that's
thing.
How you get the most done. That's how you're the most productive.
But actually, sometimes maybe you got to get yourself out of that flow state to actually look after yourself a little bit.
That's so true.
That's interesting to think
very
about.
Interesting.
Those experiences, it comes down to like the worst versions of ourselves. But because it sucks that they're also a support system. These negative behaviors are actually a support system that actually helps prevent us from breaking, which actually sucks. Because ideally, we shouldn't be put into situations where we're always about to be breaking. And we're in that constant state perpetually in our industry. And I think it comes down to also just this anxiety that we're always in and making sure we're hitting the deadlines and making sure we're always relevant, making sure that we're always getting the next job and making sure we can always pay rent that month. All of that is filled with just anxiety. And it's not just anxiety, it is that survivability. We feel like it could all end the next day if I don't do that day. And so we're always in a constant state of survival mode. That's not healthy.
Was there ever a time where you experienced really bad burnout?
So I started working with a very prominent creator and we had a massive sort of breakthrough moment, and suddenly millions of people are tuning in. We're making content at a very consistent level and always delivering, and of course that high that we were winning was addictive. And so what did we do? We did it again. We won again. So what did we do? We did it again. We won again. We did it again. We won again. So what did we do? We did it again. And it became a constant, total sort of flow state that because of just the back-to-back wins that we were getting. And for me, it then became where I would wake up at 8 a.m., get started on it, end it at like 9, 10, maybe 11 p.m., go to bed, wake up, do it again, win, go to bed, wake up, do it again, win, wake up, go to bed, do it again, win. And just that wins was just so incredibly addictive.
When you say win, what do you mean?
Just millions of people tuning in and us making really great content for that time period.
That is a dub for sure.
Yeah. And so just, I think that became addictive. And I wanted to get that, do that constantly every single day. Very slowly, but yet quickly, the energy and the focus started to slip a little bit. Because of it, it then also became like a reflex. We now knew what worked. And so we did that again, and we did it again. And then like it would then kind of then put us into this subconscious state where we kind of stopped being conscious, but we knew that we had to keep on going. There's even times when the creator was getting like, actually he was burning out as well. He was getting physically ill, like and like he couldn't even speak anymore, but because the camera was on, he went and performed anyway because he knew that he had to. And for me, this was when I started developing the habit of bringing in eating 5,000 calories worth of food every day because I knew that I had to. And it was because of just a simple flow of wins that we were getting. It just meant that we should not stop because this is going to last forever. We thought that we were invincible. We thought that we could do no wrong. We thought that we were the geniuses who would never make the mistake. Until we did. It has then become an incredibly difficult and incredibly traumatic experience on us when we had to have the world giving us a big wake-up call. The biggest slap in the face possible or I would even say like the entire world just throwing a water bucket into our face saying, what the fuck are you doing? Stop. There was a brief moment of denial. We look back of all of the content that we made, and there was this moment when I looked at it all and I went, I don't remember making this.
Wow.
Genuinely, even today, look back and watching some of these videos, and I was like, I don't ever remember making this. And the only way that I can prove that it does exist is because I've still got it in these hard drives behind me. But I don't know who did that. And it was just like, for like an entire year period, my active consciousness stopped existing, and it then became an entirely subconscious reflex sort of being where Hayden no longer existed, and the only thing that mattered was the content. And then those reflexes got to a point where we were making terrible, poor decisions, but it didn't matter. We had to get a video out that day. It didn't matter. Just like get it out. It's done. We were broken, burnt out people, but because we were winning, we completely ignored how much we were breaking ourselves.
Wow, bro. That's such a telling story. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's like, I think you would be surprised at how common that experience is. And the only difference is there was daily content that just had to go up that day. And so there just wasn't time to, react or evaluate. And I think that's a very, very common sign that you are burning out, is when you are so focused on one small thing that you don't have the ability to look at your life or look at your decisions from a macro perspective. You don't have the ability to zoom out, because the only thing that matters is checking this box or doing this task or whatever it may be. And yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing that and being vulnerable about that, because that is truly traumatic, because burnout is traumatic. It's a traumatic experience.
The big thing I learned from that is when, even if you are winning, if you are burnt out, you do lose, I would say, like cognitive abilities. Same thing for you, like cognitively, you didn't stop for that moment to think, is this the right hard drive to wipe?
I was just like,
yeah, and it was because it's like you no longer have the mental energy to be making those decisions.
Yeah, I think both of our stories, you slowly burn out. It's almost like a frog in boiling water, where you don't really realize it's happening, and then some horrible decision gets made, and then it snaps you out of it, and you're like, whoa.
Upon reflection, we should have actually taken better breaks. It's something that we do here on the podcast a lot, where it could be like, we're meant to be doing weekly uploads. Sometimes we go, nah. It's
true.
Like, no, it's like,
true.
Sometimes we're not uploading weekly. It doesn't matter.
We're sorry, but we're trying to create margin and learn our lesson from the past.
The team has been forcing me to go on vacation, which has been great, because I've really been needing to.
Come up a little
I got to
bit.
come up on our service from a little bit. But yes, it's okay being under pressure. It is okay, as long as you don't go too deep and you don't stay in that pressure for too long. And then every now and again, you got to find a way to surface.
Yeah.
And I would say that was exactly after that traumatic experience, everyone on the team did, especially me, when I reached to that surface and I looked around and I went, okay, what the hell is actually going on in my life? Because I abandoned it for a year. Friends got married that I skipped to their weddings. People moved out of London. Best friends I hadn't talked to for a year suddenly didn't give a shit about me. And I was like, what the hell happened here? My whole life fell apart, and I didn't even realize, because that didn't matter, because all that mattered was the job. And
you
so
were underwater for a little bit too long.
Exactly that.
Didn't see what was happening up top.
And so, yeah, I went to the surface and refocused a lot. One of the things that I immediately did was actually found the best therapy that I could get.
That's one other thing I wanted to mention too earlier, is seeking professional help is absolutely encouraged, and like it's very important. And there's other things that you need to do practically to drastically alter your life activities to get out of that.
For me, it was getting professional therapy. For me, it was the same thing. I was eating 5,000 to 6,000 calories a day. I had gained 40 pounds in a year. I got straight back into fitness, and I was able to work a lot of that off over the course of like 6 or 7 months. reconnected with people. I lived. The thing now today is, at that time, what we were doing, we were the biggest thing on the internet. Today, does it matter?
Great question.
It doesn't. No one gives a shit about that content anymore. Why the hell did I sacrifice my entire life for that?
Yeah.
And so that is why I am now just simply enjoying the process, and for me also maintaining as best as I can, even though I would say I'm in a state of burnout now, but it is a healthier burnout that is manageable. Yesterday is a really, really good example when there was like 8 things I needed to get done that day. And then me a couple years ago, I would spend all day doing that. Whereas yesterday, it got to about 6 p.m. and I only really did about 5 of those things. And I went, I guess I'll just do the other ones tomorrow. It's just like,
let's go.
And you know what I did instead? I then went to the swimming pool, did a couple laps, enjoyed that, got back here, and then just sat down and just relaxed and just like watched some television with my partner. I still need to do those things, but nothing's on fire. We're fine. And
except for the monitor behind you.
That was on the whole time.